the first moment they get inside your head. Someone does not need to raise their voice to disturb you. Sometimes it begins with something small, a dry comment, a cold expression, a laugh that feels aimed at you, a message left unanswered longer than you expected. Nothing dramatic happened on the outside, yet something inside you changed. Your chest tightened, your attention narrowed. Your mind left the present moment and entered a private courtroom where you started defending yourself to someone who was not even listening. That is where most people lose their peace, not in the argument itself. Before the argument, they lose it in the first second when they decide that what happened must mean something about them. You tell yourself, they disrespected me. But often, what really happened is more subtle. Someone acted from their own mood, their own weakness, their own carelessness, their own hidden motives. Then your mind took that action and translated it into a personal wound. That translation is the real doorway. The event knocks. Your interpretation lets it in. This is the part Stoicism forces you to face. No one can fully control your inner world unless you give their behavior permission to become your meaning. A rude person can speak. A careless person can ignore you. A jealous person can criticize you. But the final movement inside you still belongs to you. The moment you forget that, you stop being a person with choice and become a puppet with sensitive strings. And people notice strings. They notice what makes you explain. They notice what makes you defend. They notice what makes your face change. They notice what kind of sentence can pull you out of yourself. Once they know that, they do not need strength to move you. They only need timing. This is why provocation is so dangerous. It rarely arrives looking like an attack. It may arrive as a joke. It may arrive as, "I was just being honest." It may arrive as a small comparison, a subtle interruption, or a question designed to make you justify yourself. And because it looks small, you feel foolish for being affected. So, you do not only feel anger, you feel anger mixed with shame. You feel the pain of being touched and the embarrassment of knowing something so small had access to you. That mixture creates the reaction. You answer too sharply, or you go silent, but burn inside, or you walk away, but carry the conversation for the next 6 hours. You replay what they said. You imagine what you should have said. You create better versions of yourself in your mind, where you are calm, brilliant, untouchable. But if the scene is still alive inside you, then the provocation did not end when the other person stopped speaking. It continued through you. This is the first lesson. Silence is not always peace. Sometimes silence is just anger wearing discipline. You can look calm and still be controlled. You can say nothing and still give someone the best seat in your mind. You can refuse to answer and still spend the entire day proving yourself to them internally. That is why the goal is not to perform calmness. The goal is to become unavailable to emotional theft. Imagine walking through a loud city with noise everywhere. Horns, voices, footsteps, engines, movement. The city does not become quiet just because you want peace, but if you wear the right protection, the noise no longer reaches the center of you. Emotional mastery works the same way. You do not become untouchable by controlling the city. You become untouchable by controlling what enters. But most people try the opposite. They wait for life to become polite before they become peaceful. They wait for others to speak correctly, apologize quickly, respect them visibly, and understand them completely. That sounds fair, but it is a trap. If your peace depends on people behaving with wisdom, your peace will always be poor. You have placed your stability inside a world that does not belong to you. The untouchable person does not wait for the world to become gentle. They become precise. They know what belongs to them and what does not. Someone's tone belongs to them. Your interpretation belongs to you. Someone's insult belongs to them. Your reaction belongs to you. Someone's attempt to provoke belongs to them. Your decision to stay centered belongs to you. This does not mean you tolerate disrespect. That is another misunderstanding. You can set boundaries without becoming emotionally owned. You can answer firmly without losing your center. You can leave a situation without letting it follow you home inside your nervous system. There is a difference between protecting yourself and proving yourself. Most people confuse the two. They think anger proves self-respect. Often, it only proves access. It proves someone touched a place inside you and moved it. Real self-respect is quieter. It does not need an audience. It does not need revenge. It does not need to make the other person feel small so you can feel restored. Real self-respect begins when you can say, "This is not acceptable," without letting the unacceptable become your identity. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, do not begin by asking, "What should I say?" Ask something deeper. What part of me wants to answer so fast? That question changes the whole situation, because now the other person is no longer the center of the story. Your inner movement is. You begin to see the moment before the reaction, the tightening before the defense, the pride before the speech, the hidden need before the anger. That is the first door to becoming untouchable, not because people stop trying, but because you stop opening from the inside. Why small things feel so personal. The strange thing about being provoked is that the outside event is often smaller than the inner reaction. A person interrupts you, and suddenly your mind is no longer focused on the conversation. It is focused on status. A person criticizes your work, and suddenly the issue is no longer the work. It is your value. A person ignores your message, and suddenly the silence feels like a verdict. Nothing massive happened, yet your emotional system treats it like evidence. Evidence of what? That is the question most people never ask. They ask, why are they like this? They ask, how could they speak to me that way? They ask, why do people not respect me? These questions feel useful because they keep the attention outside. They make the other person the problem, and sometimes the other person is acting badly. But even then, your reaction still reveals something about you. You do not react to everything. You react to what touches a private fear. If someone calls you something you know is completely false, it usually passes through you. It may annoy you, but it does not enter deeply. But if someone says something near a doubt you already carry, the sentence lands differently. It does not feel like an opinion. It feels like confirmation. That is why provocation feels personal. Not because the other person always knows your wound. Sometimes they are not that intelligent. Sometimes they are careless, childish, bitter, or insecure. But your mind completes the attack for them. It takes their words and connects them to something old. Maybe you already fear being overlooked. Then, one small dismissal becomes proof that you are invisible. Maybe you already doubt your competence. Then one criticism becomes proof that you are not enough. Maybe you already feel replaceable. Then one ignored message becomes proof that people leave when you need them. The moment is new. The wound is not. This is where the deeper emotional layer begins. Most anger is not pure anger. It is fear wearing heat. It is hurt trying to look powerful. It is shame trying to become loud before someone notices it is ashamed. You think you are angry because someone disrespected you, but often you are angry because their behavior made you feel uncertain about your place. That uncertainty is painful, and the mind hates uncertainty, so it tries to restore control. It builds arguments. It prepares defenses. It imagines confrontations. It searches for a way to make the other person admit they were wrong, because if they admit they were wrong, maybe you can feel stable again. But notice the trap. Your stability now depends on their confession. That is not freedom. That is dependence in a sharper form. This is why expecting people to behave like you creates suffering. You assume they should understand what you would understand. You assume they should care how you would care. You assume they should speak with the same awareness, loyalty, or restraint that you would use. Then, when they do not, you feel betrayed by a standard they never agreed to live by. People are not you. They are not carrying your history, your sensitivity, your values, or your inner rules. Some people are careless. Some are insecure. Some are competitive. Some only understand power when someone finally stops giving them access. Some do not know they are hurting you. Others know exactly what they are doing and still expect your reaction to feed them. In both cases, the lesson is the same. Their nature is not your command. If you expect every person to behave with your level of awareness, you will spend your life offended by reality. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means you stop demanding that people become different before you become clear. You see them as they are, and then you choose your response from strength instead of surprise. This is important because surprise creates vulnerability. When you are shocked every time people are selfish, careless, rude, or inconsistent, you keep handing life the power to destabilize you. But when you understand human nature, you stop being shocked by ordinary weakness. You may still set boundaries. You may still walk away. But you do not collapse inside every time someone acts from a lower place. There is a quiet power in expecting less from people's awareness and more from your own discipline. This is not cynicism, it is clarity. Cynicism says, people are terrible, so nothing matters. Clarity says, people are flawed, so I must guard my peace intelligently. One makes you bitter, the other makes you free. When someone provokes you, the first instinct is to personalize it. They did this to me. But sometimes a person's behavior is not a message about your worth. It is a confession of their own state. Their sarcasm may reveal insecurity. Their coldness may reveal immaturity. Their criticism may reveal envy. Their need to get a reaction may reveal how little control they have over themselves. But you only see that when you stop making yourself the center of every wound. This is a hard shift, because the ego wants everything to be about you, even pain, especially pain. It would rather be attacked than irrelevant. It would rather say, they tried to hurt me, than admit they may simply be acting from their own emptiness. That is why many people stay trapped in resentment. Resentment keeps them important in the story. But peace requires a different kind of humility. It requires admitting that not every careless word deserves a throne in your mind. Not every rude person deserves to become a chapter in your identity. Not every provocation deserves interpretation. Sometimes it is only noise. And when you can see noise as noise, you stop turning it into meaning. That is when you begin to feel the real difference between being calm and being untouchable. Calmness says, I will try not to react. Untouchable says, this does not get to define me. One is effort, the other is separation. And separation is power. Because the moment you stop treating every behavior as a personal verdict, people lose the easiest way to control you. They can still speak. They can still judge. They can still act from their nature, but they can no longer force you to carry their nature as your emotional burden. That is where the next layer begins. You stop asking why they did it. You start asking why you needed it to mean so much. The hidden script behind your reaction. Once you begin to watch your reactions closely, you notice a pattern that is difficult to deny. Different people trigger the same feeling. A coworker interrupts you, and you feel small. A friend cancels plans, and you feel unwanted. A stranger speaks rudely, and you feel disrespected. The names change. The places change. The details change. But the inner movement feels familiar. That is because you are not only reacting to the current moment, you are reacting through a script. A script is the meaning your mind has learned to attach to certain situations. It may have been built slowly, through years of being ignored, criticized, compared, embarrassed, or made to feel like your value depended on approval. Eventually, your nervous system begins to predict pain before pain fully arrives. Someone questions you, and your mind prepares a defense. Someone looks away, and your mind prepares rejection. Someone uses a sharp tone, and your body prepares war. You call it intuition, but sometimes it is old fear, moving quickly. Speed is not always wisdom. Sometimes speed is conditioning. This is why people repeat the same emotional battles in different relationships. They think they are meeting new problems, but often they are meeting old meanings. The present gives them a small event, and the past gives it a heavy interpretation. Then they react as if the interpretation is fact. This is how provocation becomes automatic. It finds the script and presses play. The person who provokes you may only say one sentence, but inside, that sentence awakens a full history. Suddenly, you are not only responding to them, you are responding to every time you felt dismissed, misunderstood, underestimated, or made to feel powerless. That is why your reaction can feel bigger than the moment. It is not only the moment speaking, it is the memory behind it. Stoicism begins by interrupting this script, not by denying emotion, but by slowing the space between the event and the meaning. Before you react, you ask, what story did my mind just attach to this? That question seems simple, but it breaks the spell. Because once you see the story, you are no longer fully inside it. For example, someone criticizes your idea. The automatic script says, they think I'm incompetent. But a clearer mind asks, is that what happened, or is that what I fear? Someone ignores your message. The script says, I don't matter. But awareness asks, is silence always rejection? Someone jokes at your expense. The script says, I must defend my status. But discipline asks, will reacting raise my value or reveal my insecurity? That pause is where the old pattern weakens. Not all at once, but enough for choice to return. And choice is the beginning of power. This is where the practical side matters. Insight alone is not enough. Many people understand themselves and still obey themselves blindly. They can explain their triggers with beautiful language, but when the moment comes, they still react. That is because awareness must become practice. The first practice is naming. When you feel provoked, name the emotion before you obey it. Say internally, anger, hurt, shame, fear, pride. Naming creates distance. It separates the observer from the storm. You are not saying the emotion is wrong. You are saying it is not the ruler. The second practice is questioning. Ask, What am I making this mean? Not what happened, not what they intended. What am I making this mean? This question is brutal because it exposes the hidden translation. You may discover that the insult hurt because you were already seeking validation. You may discover that the silence hurt because you were already depending on attention. You may discover that the criticism hurt because you were already uncertain of your own standard. The third practice is choosing. Do not ask, "What do I feel like doing?" That question belongs to impulse. Ask, "What response protects my long-term peace?" Sometimes the answer is silence. Sometimes it is a short boundary. Sometimes it is leaving. Sometimes it is listening because the criticism contains truth. But the response must come from values, not heat. This is how you stop being predictable. A predictable person reacts according to wound. A disciplined person responds according to principle. That difference changes everything. Because once you are no longer predictable, people can no longer use your pattern against you. If they try to insult you, they meet calm. If they try to bait you, they meet space. If they try to make you explain yourself endlessly, they meet a clear sentence and no extra performance. They may not like it. They may even become more aggressive for a moment because your old reaction is missing. But that is how you know the pattern is changing. Provocation often gets louder when it stops working. This is why you must not confuse peace with immediate comfort. The first time you stop reacting, you may feel more tension, not less. Your body expects the old release. Your ego wants the old defense. Your mind wants the old argument. You may feel like you are losing because you are not feeding the familiar cycle. But you are not losing. You are withdrawing from a system that trained you to mistake reaction for control. The hardest part is that the ego will disguise itself as justice. It will say, "You cannot let them get away with that." Sometimes it is right. Boundaries matter. Respect matters. Truth matters. But before you respond, you must ask whether you are protecting truth or protecting pride. They feel similar in the body. They are not the same in the soul. Truth can speak clearly and stop. Pride needs to keep going. Truth sets a boundary. Pride performs a trial. Truth says, "This is not acceptable." Pride says, "You must understand exactly how wrong you are so I can feel whole again." That is the difference. And once you see that difference, the script loses its authority. Now you can hear the old voice rise and still not follow it. You can feel the familiar heat and still not become it. You can notice the urge to prove yourself and choose not to turn your dignity into a debate. This is where the story starts to change. Not outside, inside. Because when the script no longer writes your reaction, other people lose the role of author. The point where calmness becomes real power. Many people reach this point and think the lesson is simply to ignore provocation. They say, "Just don't react." They tell themselves to stay quiet, stay above it, stay composed. And for a while, that may work on the surface. They speak less. They smile tightly. They hold back their anger. They act as if nothing touched them. But inside, the storm continues. This is not mastery. It is suppression. And suppression has a hidden cost. What you push down does not disappear just because it is invisible. It becomes tension in the body. It becomes overthinking at night. It becomes resentment toward people you never honestly confronted. It becomes the quiet bitterness of someone who believes they are peaceful while secretly keeping score. That is why the next question matters. Not, "How do I stop reacting?" but, "Why do I need to react?" This question cuts deeper because it moves from behavior to need. Most reactions are attempts to restore something you think was taken. Respect, control, approval, importance, identity. The moment someone threatens one of these, your mind rushes to recover it. You call it anger, but often it is a rescue mission. You are trying to rescue your image. That is why people argue hardest when they feel misrepresented. They cannot tolerate being seen incorrectly. They feel an urgent need to correct the story in the other person's mind. But this urgency reveals dependence. If you need someone to see you correctly before you can feel steady, then their perception owns part of your emotional state. This is where the Stoic path becomes uncomfortable. It does not tell you to accept lies. It does not tell you to become passive. It tells you to stop worshipping other people's perception as if it were the source of your reality. People can misunderstand you and you can still remain whole. People can judge you and you can still remain clear. People can provoke you and you can still refuse to become their version of you. That is power, but it requires a painful separation. You must separate your worth from being understood. You must separate your peace from being agreed with. You must separate your identity from being respected by everyone in the room. Without that separation, every social interaction becomes a test you are desperate to pass. And that desperation leaks. It leaks through over-explaining. It leaks through defensive tone. It leaks through the need to have the last word. It leaks through the way you keep returning to the same conversation after it is over. You may tell yourself you are standing up for yourself, but sometimes you are only begging the world to confirm what you have not confirmed inside. This is the part many people will resist, because it is easier to say they are disrespectful than to admit I still need their respect to feel real. It is easier to say they made me angry than to admit their opinion still has access to my worth. It is easier to say I am just defending myself than to admit I cannot yet tolerate being seen wrongly. That does not mean the other person is innocent. Some people do provoke. Some people do test boundaries. Some people use sarcasm because they lack the courage to be direct. Some people try to make you emotional so they can call you unstable after they caused the reaction. But your power begins only where your responsibility begins. If you give them full responsibility for your state, you also give them full authority over your state. That is the exchange most people do not see. Blame feels good because it protects the ego. But blame also chains you to the person you blame. Responsibility feels heavier at first. Then it becomes freedom. Because what belongs to you can be trained. Your pause can be trained. Your interpretation can be trained. Your boundaries can be trained. Your attention can be trained. But what you keep assigning to other people remains outside your control, and therefore remains a point of weakness. This is where boundaries enter the story correctly. Boundaries are not emotional explosions with better language. Boundaries are not punishments. Boundaries are not dramatic declarations designed to make the other person feel guilty. A true boundary is calm because it is based on ownership. It says, "This is what I allow near my peace," not, "You must become different so I can be okay." There is a huge difference. If someone speaks to you with disrespect, you do not need to collapse or attack. You can say, "I'm willing to continue this conversation when it is respectful." Then stop. No speech, no performance, no emotional trial. A boundary becomes powerful when it does not ask for applause. The same applies to criticism. Not every criticism is an attack. Some of it is useful. Some of it is clumsy but true. Some of it is false and should be discarded. The undisciplined person reacts to the pain of criticism before examining its value. The disciplined person separates tone from truth. Maybe their delivery was poor, but was there something to learn? This is how you turn provocation into training. A rude comment trains your pause. A false judgment trains your detachment. An unfair criticism trains your ability to filter. A disrespectful tone trains your boundary. Every difficult person becomes a mirror, not because they are wise, but because your reaction reveals what still needs work. That is why gratitude appears here, but not as shallow positivity. Gratitude is not pretending the insult was good. It is recognizing that the moment exposed something useful. It showed you where you still seek approval. It showed you where pride outruns wisdom. It showed you where silence is not yet peace. Gratitude transforms anger because it changes the question. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What is this showing me?" That question does not excuse people. It liberates you from making their behavior useless. Even a small provocation can become material for self-mastery if you refuse to waste it on resentment. This is the turning point. You are no longer trying to look calm. You are becoming less dependent on the things that used to disturb you. And when dependence weakens, calmness stops being a performance. It becomes your natural position, the state they can no longer reach. To become untouchable does not mean you become cold. Cold people are often not strong. They are simply defended. They have built a wall where awareness should be. They avoid feeling and call it control. They detach because closeness frightens them. They confuse numbness with peace. That is not Stoicism. That is fear with a disciplined face. The untouchable person is different. They still feel. They still notice. They still understand when something is unfair, rude, or manipulative. But the feeling does not seize the throne. The event does not become their identity. The other person does not become the author of their internal weather. This is the final distinction. Emotionless means nothing reaches you because you are closed. Untouchable means things reach your awareness, but not your center. You can hear an insult without becoming it. You can receive criticism without collapsing into shame. You can notice disrespect without turning your dignity into a public performance. You can walk away without replaying the scene like a debt someone still owes you. That is freedom. But freedom has a price. You must give up the secret pleasure of reaction. Most people say they want peace, but part of them enjoys the fire. The fire gives them a sense of importance. It gives them a story. It gives them a villain. It gives them a reason to feel righteous. Anger can be addictive because it makes you feel powerful while hiding how affected you are. This is the paradox most people miss. The person who reacts the most often feels the least in control. The person who explains the most often feels the least understood. The person who fights every small disrespect often has the deepest fear of being small. That is why real power may feel boring at first. No dramatic comeback, no emotional victory, no long speech where everyone finally understands your pain. Just a pause, a breath, a clean response. A clear boundary, then release. The ego hates this, because the ego wants a scene. Wisdom wants freedom, and freedom is quieter than victory. This is why letting go becomes the final practice. Not letting people walk over you, not forgetting what happened, not pretending you were not hurt. Letting go means you stop carrying the emotional weight after the lesson has been taken. It means you refuse to keep drinking from a moment that already poisoned your peace once. Anger often claims it is protecting you. Sometimes, in the first moment, it gives useful information. It tells you a line was crossed. It tells you something deserves attention. But after that, anger can turn into a second prison. The event hurt you once. Replaying it hurts you repeatedly. At some point, the other person is no longer doing it. You are. That is a hard truth, but it is also the exit. Because if you are participating in the continuation of the pain, then you can also stop participating. You can choose where your attention goes. You can choose whether the insult becomes a lesson or a loop. You can choose whether the criticism becomes information or identity. You can choose whether the silence becomes rejection or simply silence. This is where the full teaching returns. An event is not a command. A rude tone is not a command to lose your calm. A false judgment is not a command to prove your worth. A delay is not a command to doubt your importance. A provocation is not a command to become available. It is only an invitation, and you can decline. That is what makes someone untouchable. Not that people stop speaking, not that life becomes gentle, not that every room finally respects them. People still test. People still misunderstand. People still project their pain onto others. Human nature does not become pure just because you become aware. The difference is that you no longer require purity from the world in order to remain stable. You become your own ground. This is not easy. Some days the old script will return. A tone will still bother you. A comment will still sting. A silence will still make your mind reach for meaning. The point is not perfection. The point is recovery. The quicker you see the movement, the less power it has. The quicker you return to yourself, the less deeply the world can enter. That is mastery in real life. Not never feeling anger, but not handing anger the steering wheel. Not never being hurt, but not letting hurt become your ruler. Not never being provoked, but no longer becoming predictable when someone tries. So when the next provocation comes, and it will come, do not treat it as an emergency. Treat it as a test of ownership. Notice the body. Notice the story. Notice the need. Notice the urge to correct, prove, explain, punish, or win. Then pause long enough to remember what belongs to you. Your attention belongs to you. Your meaning belongs to you. Your response belongs to you. Your peace belongs to you. And if it belongs to you, do not abandon it just because someone else is careless with theirs. The final truth is simple, but it is not soft. No one can make you untouchable by treating you well. If your calm only exists when people are kind, it is not strength yet. It is circumstance. Real strength begins when someone tries to provoke you and finds no doorway large enough to enter. Not because you became stone, because you became clear. Clear enough to see the insult without swallowing it. Clear enough to feel the sting without obeying it. Clear enough to set the boundary without losing the self. Clear enough to let the moment pass without turning it into a home. That is the state. Quiet, firm, unborrowed, when nothing inside you needs to answer, nothing outside you can own you.